if you want it, go freaking get it. And yeah, it's going to be perhaps a little painful, but you'll get what you want. Truly surround yourself with superstars. These people are phenomenal. I mean, every time I get together with them, I am in awe of. I think having a peer-to-peer group is invaluable. I've had one in some form or another for 15 years, and I would never own a business without having some type of peer-to-peer, whether formal. We were doing virtual happy hours, and most of our discussion, my recollection of it was telling each other that it's going to be all right.
What was going through your mind? I mean, was it just like, well, I guess got to do it again, or is it I've been here before, I can do it, or were you nervous? I mean, tell me, what was it like?
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. I'm honored to have today's guest, one of my good friends here in Atlanta, Mitesh Patel. He's the founder of Blue Sky Law, which is a business and real estate law firm here in Atlanta. Mitesh, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about your firm, what you do, how would you characterize your firm, how many lawyers, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. And I think it's so cool that you're doing this and glad the podcast is going so well. But as you said, Mitesh Patel, I'm the founder and principal of Blue Sky Law based in Atlanta, Georgia. We've got 9 attorneys, handful of support staff, and we're primarily focused on middle market, lower middle market, privately held businesses. Me personally, I'm a mergers and acquisitions attorney, and that's where I spend the vast majority of my time is helping folks get ready for an exit, cleaning up the house, so to speak, getting the hedges trimmed and the house painted before we take that house, the company, to market.
So you had a pretty interesting and varied legal career, which we're going to get to, but as I was getting ready for this podcast, I learned some new things that I didn't know about you. So you got a really interesting pre-law career background, and I had no idea. I've known you for a long time now. I had no idea. So we're going to talk about some of that first. So I guess first thing is, you're here in Atlanta, but where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Appalachia, East Tennessee, a little bitty town called Tazewell. Most folks, even Tennessee residents that have been there for their whole lives, have not heard of it. But there's an interesting book right now. It's a fiction book called Demon Copperhead, written by Barbara Kingsolver. And where that book is set is the community in which I grew up. It's technically in Virginia, but that actual county, that town where it's taking place, it's a real place. It's like 5 minutes from where I grew up. So it didn't shock me really as much as I think it has a lot of folks. But anyway, that was home. I mean, it was a tiny little town. We didn't really have television. You just did outside redneck stuff. Looking back, it was a great place to grow up. It really was. I could not wait to get out. It just felt very confining to me at that time. But now I'd go back and home. So,
yeah, that's you're gonna move your law firm there. Is that next place?
I don't know if they have internet in that town. But I would if I could.
Yeah. So you went to law school. Did you go to Tennessee for law school?
No, I did. My undergrad was at University of Tennessee, and it was in finance, and I worked in finance for a few years and almost a number of other things. I guess we'll get into that. But law school was University of Florida down in Gainesville. Spent only just that time in Florida there for school. Florida was great. People in it were great. It's too hot for me. And frankly, I wanted a big city, kind of that backlash probably from that tiny town where I grew up. I wanted to get that big city feel for a while, so I came straight here to Atlanta. I had a couple of really nice offers. I was very lucky in that sense, and so I was able to hit the ground running once I got here.
Cool. Okay, so you went to Tennessee, you got a finance degree, so that's part of your background. So before law school, you were a financial analyst, is that correct? And so what does that mean, and what did you do?
So it sat at a desk and looked at numbers all day. So I was a corporate financial analyst. So the company I worked for, massive international automotive parts manufacturer. I think at that time they were about a $30 billion company. They had like 88,000 employees worldwide. I was in one of their Tennessee manufacturing facilities. My job was to keep up with scrap loss, job costing, product costing, all these things that are really important to massive manufacturing companies. Is there every fraction of a penny that they can save times the millions of products that they produce is a lot of money for them. And so that's constantly what I was working on. It's horrendously boring. And so I didn't last there very long. I was like, I got to get out of here. Tried my hand at executive recruiting. That was probably one of the best things I ever did for my career because it is sales and it's hard. I had an amazing teacher. She pushed me, and I thought she was a little mean at the time. Looking back now, I was like, she just cared a lot, cared a lot about me, cared a lot about her business, but she taught me how to forge relationships. So I had manufacturing companies that didn't go anywhere.
Well, before you move on to that, I want to sit on the executive recruiter thing for a while. So how and why did you go there? What led you to that? And was there a specific industry niche that you took care of, or how did it work? I mean,
I did, yeah. So I went there really out of not really being sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to have more control over my career and over earning power. So I love that. I love the fact that my efforts, if I was able to place somebody, bring in a job, etc., that I would get a big piece of that. I love that. I thought that it made a lot of sense to me, and I was like, okay, it's up to me as far as production is concerned. Also, I really did want to go into personal financial planning. That's why I went into finance. At that time, which was a long time in Knoxville, Tennessee, a long time ago, there weren't a lot of financial planning shops, truly, the independent ones. And I wasn't willing to move. I think that I did myself a little bit of a disservice at that time by being so limited, kind of restricted, to my geographic area. But it all worked out just fine, getting this recruiting job. And I was primarily placing CFOs and controllers in manufacturing companies. So it was very niche. It was a very niche area of business.
So as part of that job, was there a lot of cold calls? I mean, is that when you say sales, is that what you mean? What you're doing, cold calling?
Yeah. This is cold calling. I'm going to date myself. This is cold calling when the internet is just coming out, right? Which means that very few companies at that time had websites. I'm talking like 10%. And the ones that did were like massive publicly traded companies. I remember specifically in undergrad, I did some little project on the Callaway Golf Company and Nike, and both of them had 2-page websites. 2 pages, that's it. There's no commerce, nothing, right? So finding companies, finding the decision maker. Now we just go to a company's website, we go, team, who's there? Okay, CEO, CFO, and everybody that works there. At that time, it wasn't that open. So even if you call into a company to ask, the gatekeeper would be like, oh, no, I'm not telling you who works here. And so it was difficult from that standpoint. It was absolutely 100% cold calling. I was dialing for dollars. My goal was to try to make 50 or so outgoing calls in a day. It doesn't seem like a lot, objectively, but man, getting hung up on 49 out of 50 times, that was it. I say get hung up on. This is East Tennessee. People were friendly, but they were just like, sorry, son. Like,
bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Yeah. You're doing this, right?
Yeah. So were you calling on companies, or are you trying to track down like the executives to place at companies, or both?
A little bit of both. If it was a really specialized position, and a lot of them were, companies were particular, but truly the very specialized ones, cost accountants, for example, right? Not many of those around. I was calling into every company I could find, right? Pull those stuff for folks out. So it was a combination of both. The hardest part was getting the job orders, as we'd call them, from the companies, right? The folks looking to hire. And, it's not an inexpensive service, charging anywhere from 20 to 30% of a person's starting salary. You've got to have a pretty motivated company that either has had a really hard time or they just invest that type of time and money into their workforce. And I think it's probably more prevalent now to see that kind of investment. I think we're right now in the heyday of employees and employee empowerment, but at that time it was tough. I was cold calling into companies to try to find out if they were hiring, occasionally you'd see an ad place, you'd be like, let me try to call in there and see if I can get that business. That never worked, or very rarely worked, I should say. But yeah, it was in it. Again, honing that skill, having the training that I did, I wouldn't be where I am today if it were not for those few years of doing executive recruiting.
We'll get to it later, but I've always sort of thought of you as a good business developer in the law, and maybe this is why, or part of why. The resilience, like you said, the consistency, 50 calls a day, the hang up, you got to keep going, and you got to figure out how to talk. All right, talk around the gatekeepers and talk to people.
Yeah.
All right,
That's
so
very sweet job.
yeah, so you didn't last there too long, sounds like. But the other couple things that I noticed in your bio, so you were a firefighter and a rescue technician. Tell me about that. Was that before or after college and executive recruiter stuff? And what did you do?
Right in the middle of all that, again, I in that little town where I grew up, they had a volunteer fire department, and most people don't know the overwhelming majority of firefighters, rescue technicians in the United States are volunteers. It doesn't mean that they're not professionals, because this small volunteer city department sent me to the Tennessee State Fire School, paid for it, got my certification, etc. We had lots of training, but I started there at the age of 16. I was in the Boy Scouts, our local scout leader. Something came up. He couldn't do it anymore, and nobody picked it up. I mean, it's that small of a town, right? And so our scouting program just died. And I was like, okay, I liked being out of the house and staying active. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And one of the added benefits is the fire chief was one of my fourth grade teachers. And so I knew him pretty well and was able to just approach him and say, hey, can I do this? And he was like, hey, you're a bit young, but yeah, we've taken them as young as you. And so I was studious and minded my manners, so I think it was probably easy for him. But just absolutely one of the most awesome experiences. I have done some insane things, and it's amazing with enough training what you can, fears that we have, how easily you can put them aside by repetitive training. And I think that's the case with almost any areas of our life. But when I went to college, I couldn't do fire anymore, didn't really want to, but in Knoxville, Tennessee, had an opportunity to do rescue. And so, and rescue was, for the most part, cutting cars off of bodies, cutting cars off of people. I know it doesn't sound great, but that's the vast majority of what we will do. In between that stuff would be water rescues. East Tennessee is filled with cave and vertical rescue, heavy trench rescue. So that team went up to New York during 9/11, right, to remove all this heavy concretes, that kind of work, right? So it was dangerous. It was fun. It was very much like a fraternity. It's probably the only thing in my life that I still truly miss. I really do miss it. But when I went to college, I was doing that through undergrad, and it was pretty easy to work with a college schedule. But then when I started working in my professional job, I had to figure out a way to make it work. So I actually moved into the station, and so I would work the night shift, which is fine in the wintertime. People don't get out and do dumb stuff. I could have a nice night of sleep every now and then, 2-3 nights a week. I'd probably get woken up. But my day job was the financial analyst job and the recruiting job. So I'd get up, sign off of the truck and get ready to go to work and then come back and do that. Summer times were busy. People get out, drink a lot, do dumb stuff. And so, from like May until October, night times were busy. I'd get woken up 3, 4, 5 times a night. I look back now and I'm like, I don't know how I did it, because I feel like I'm in a perpetual state of being tired now. So back then, I just nonstop. I didn't need that much sleep, but so much fun.
That's
so
really cool.
10 years. Yeah.
That's really cool. So did you ever, were you like rappelling out of helicopters in some of these mountain rescues and stuff? Was that you? Was that the other? That was the other team.
The other team, those were our teams. They're usually not out of helicopters, although we did have a contract with local UT Lifestar for our dive rescue team. So like we had to go for dive rescue for another community. We'd go there to their place, put our tanks in. We had special holders for the helicopter, and then off we go. So I was on our dive and swiftwater rescue team. I enjoyed doing that a little bit more. So, but yeah, we would do a lot of cliff rescue. Again, people slipping, falling down into caves. So yeah, you strap up and off you go.
Wow, that's cool, man. I never knew that. That's really cool.
And just last week, I was at a local restaurant, and somebody had an accident as they were coming in, and people were running out. And instinctively, I was the guy running in. I didn't notice until later. Everybody's like, "You're insane." I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Well, I didn't think about it much." So, could have hurt myself possibly, but that's just again training.
You're getting old, man. You're gonna pull back now. You're gonna go in there.
Yeah, right.
They're gonna have to rescue you.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so all right, so we'll go back. So financial analyst and executive recruiter. Now, what took you to law school? How did you finally end up there?
I mean, I'm not going to give you the answer that I probably gave on my application or to the school because it was total bogus. I mean, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go back, and I felt like I really needed to go back to graduate school. I wanted to get a master's or a doctorate. So I was really considering an MBA or law school. And at that time, so many folks I knew were doing MBAs. They seemed to be kind of a dime a dozen. And that was just me as well. And so I decided to go the law school route. But truly, I did not dream of being an attorney. I never once thought about it until after I graduated from undergrad. I would say a little bit of that was being at that big corporation, and when we would have to make critical decisions, it would always go to legal first, right? After we do it, and okay, let's send it to legal. I'd be like, it's numbers. What are they going to send it to legal? And so I was like, I want to be that guy making some of those decisions, telling the other folks what's good. So that was a part.
So you graduate law school, and then I guess that's when you moved to Atlanta. You went sort of the big law route, right?
Yep, you got it. I did. The on-campus recruiting, they would come, and dog and pony show, the rock star summers. I hope those are coming back. I hope they still do those. But yeah, I don't know. Did you do one of those? Did you get a rock star summer?
I wanted to be a plaintiff's trial lawyer. That's all I tried to get.
Yeah.
And I didn't even try. I look back, and it was the dumbest thing. It was the dumbest thing. It was, I should have gone to I should have tried, man. Because, I mean, you got paid like crazy, and then, you're just basically getting steak dinner and going out every night,
Yeah, well, you look back, they keep you drunk, so you don't know any better. And when it's time to sign on the dotted line, you say yes because you had a phenomenal time. It's a great experience. It truly is. I think almost any big law, if you've got a good team, good people around you, the real advantage is that advantage and disadvantage, right? You're working a ton of hours, but you get really complex stuff, and you're working literally about double what any of your friends in other industries do. So 1 year in big law, I'm still to this day convinced is pretty close to 2 years in a mid or smaller size shop. And then you add the complexity and the pressure, you grow up really fast. So, but it also just absolutely, I had a head full of hair when I started, and it didn't take long. Kids and big law and gone.
Man. I've heard some people say, depending on where you are, when you actually get your effective hourly rate of what you're getting paid, you got a big check, but when you factor in how much you're working to get it, it's not as good as it looks.
Yeah, it's not a 40-hour-a-week job by any stretch. Yeah, you're working 2 jobs. So if you look at that and the number of hours, it's not so awesome at that point.
And so were you doing real estate stuff then? Or
I was doing securities.
Okay, securities.
Just securities. Yeah, work, S11s. It's some non-REIT work, but it was all Regulation D, 506, all PPMs and the like. If you've seen all that, I mean, I sat at a desk and cranked those things out. Yeah, I don't know if for folks that invest, you don't get many of these anymore. You get those little tissue paper, prospectuses when you invest in stocks and bonds. And even before I went to law school, I was like, God, what poor sap has to write this crap.
Yeah.
I was the poor sap that ended up, and I was like, oh, this is what hell is like. So
it's probably Chat GPT nowadays. So
it might be. I hope so, for the associate's sake.
So you burned it out there at the big law firm, and then eventually you left and you went to I called a smaller law firm. Tell me about that.
Yes, it was right at 2009 when I left. I'll only half jokingly say that if I would have stayed, they probably would have fired me. It was just the times. I mean, at the firm that I was in, they were bringing in folks en masse into the conference rooms and just like, okay, all 30 of you need to go. So there was a lot of nervousness around. I got a little talking to by some of the partners. It was basically like, yeah, maybe you start exploring options. We'll talk again in December. And this was like early part of the year. And I was like, they're giving me a year basically to figure something out. And I knew I was going to leave and start my own practice. I thought, wow, what the heck? Might as well go now, right? I mean, I knew that building relationships takes time. And, if you want to have your own practice, you have to have your own clients, and it's relationship based. I was like, what the heck? Might as well start now. Start building that book rather than waiting. I had offers. I did interview a little bit. I had a couple of offers for other big law firms, but I was like, it's just going to put me right back in the same spot.
So you knew you were going to start your firm.
I did. I did not right out of the gate. I mean, it was a lot of when those layoffs were happening, after I got the talking to, so to speak, sat down with those partners. It was 2 or 3 months of really thinking, etc. I tell folks still to this day, the hardest part about at least for me, starting my own practice was making up my mind to do it in earnest. Once I was like, I'm going to do this, everything else was significantly easier than that decision, because the rest was blocking and tackling. Ask people to figure out what you got to do, and as attorneys, we're really good at doing that. So, so the rest was just water under the bridge, super easy. But yeah, I went to that smaller firm. It's kind of a lot of us were doing some office sharing in there. And once I got my book of business to a place where I was like, I don't need to split with these guys anymore. Frankly, I needed more resources. And this was 2011. I left, hung up my own shingle. One of the guys that I had met there at that firm, he was working on his book of business. So he came along. He was kind of straddling both firms for a little while. I hired someone else, eventually got an office manager. My wife helped out for a while, and I do not recommend that to folks. If you like your significant other, some people can do it. I don't know how they do it. I think they're insane, but it didn't work for us, and all for the best. Though. That was the beginning way back when. This is the original sign for my office. I just hung on to it all these years, but yeah, I had fun. It was hard too.
That's a good looking sign.
Oh. Yeah, appreciate it. Right.
So you ended up starting your firm, and then I guess the guy joined you. Were y'all partners? How did that work?
We were. So not at first. At first, again, he was working on building his book. We gave him a goal. Hey, once you hit this number, then we'll start talking about it. So it was maybe 3.5 years, 4 years or so working jointly, but not as equity partners. And then it was around 2014 or so. He bought into the practice. We rebranded at that time with our names. We went and bought a building, which I still own here, and we were off to the races. So we had 6 years together as partners, and then in 2020, that's when we decided to split it up and go our separate ways. And that's where my current firm, Blue Sky Law, came about.
All right, so we'll talk about Blue Sky real quick. So when you and your partner went your separate ways, did you jointly own that real estate as well as the firm?
We did, yeah, both. And I will tell you that we both had the advantage of doing a lot of partnership disputes for clients, a bunch of them. And we still do a lot of them. I think we have about a dozen actively right now. And we had learned what to do and what not to do and where those things end up. They almost always end at the exact same place with the same types of activities that lead to that. And so it was like, okay, let's just fast forward this. Let's promise each other that we'll be civil, and we were. We ended up talking through intermediaries toward the end. We haven't communicated in years, but it's all okay. It worked out. I bought his half of the building, which is something that I really wanted, and thankfully he did not really want it, and so that worked out well. And we worked out some stuff with the cash assets. Certain clients have free choice, but there are definitely certain clients where we were both working on them. So it was like, okay, we didn't want to cause confusion with those clients who wanted to keep it clean. So there was some discussion of, hey, you pursue that or these particular ones. I'll talk with these, and then we'll kind of see how they shake out. But we really had a fast track process for that. We start to finish was 2 months. In all honesty, it should have taken about 9 to 12 months. Just even though we had a plan, but we really crammed a lot of stuff in very quick. Wasn't necessarily by my choice, but whatever. It's, hindsight, it works out.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember when that went down, but and I do a lot of that too. And it's even in the most amicable breakups, there's always going to be tension at some point. And so, I mean, I think you guys, I wasn't in on all the details, but at least from where I sat, it looks like you guys handled it, pretty professionally. You're both standing still.
Still standing, still practicing. Yeah. I think it all worked out. Sadly, we learned the most. Truly, like, we learned deeply from the worst things in our. I mean, for those that can come out on the other side and look back, and I was fortunate in that way, right? And so I learned a lot. I wish I didn't have to learn it that way, but I did, and I'm better off for it. I wouldn't repeat it.
Yeah.
But it's honestly made me a much better practitioner, better father, better husband, just all around. I think better and much more patient.
So you guys went your separate ways, and you said, "All right, I'll take the building, and I'm going to rebuild this thing." And was it just you, or did you have attorneys that came with you?
We did. So at the time that our firm split, I might get the number wrong. We'd gotten up to about 18 attorneys,
Oh, wow.
a handful or so of support staff, and it might have been just a little bit smaller than that. My ex-business partner is a litigator by trade, and so some of our litigators, I think all but one went with him. The rest stayed with me. And so at that point, and some people were like, "Yeah, it's time. Let me go look at some other stuff." But it was right there, kind of March to May of 2020. The world was shut down. Partnership dispute was full blown. A dog of 18 years passed away, and I was like, "Man, can this get any worse?" But it's all fine now. But yeah, it was. Sorry, going back to your original question. At that point, there was kind of 4 or 5. There may be 5 or 6 attorneys on my side. A couple that we had as of counsel. So if we include them, maybe about 8 of us that stayed here with me and that helped to rebuild the firm, if you will.
And so you decided to go with the name Blue Sky Law, which everybody that listens know I love a good trade name. And so tell me about that. Why trade name? Why Blue Sky Law?
At 2020, the sky was falling. I was like, all right, we need some positivity in our lives. But it was a combination of different things. As a group, amongst our attorneys, I said, let's all come up with a cool name that doesn't include my name. And thankfully, our Georgia laws have changed where we can now have, agnostic law firm names. I'm so glad finally coming into the new millennia. But that was a big part of it. We were doing more and more work out of state. I wanted something that could survive me, right? So if partners came and went, we wouldn't have to rebrand. And the firm was frankly becoming much more than just me. And so, the other things, we wanted some positivity about it, and we liked that. And we also wanted something that other attorneys would recognize that, hey, this is a business-oriented firm. So that's kind of where we settled on Blue Sky Law. And the interesting thing is the domain was already owned by another law firm, and so as was the trademark. And so we had to reach out and do some finagling, negotiating, purchasing of the existing trademark, domain, etc. But that's what we wanted. It worked out well. I'm so glad that I did it.
That's pretty cool. I did not know you had to go buy that. That's pretty cool. The other thing, you said you started as a securities lawyer, so I always wondered, did it have something to do with the Blue Sky laws?
It did a little bit. It's interesting because folks, oh, you guys are just a securities firm, and now we go, well, it's do securities in a slightly different way with M&A, that is securities work, but not in the traditional sense. So yeah, we don't do as much of that hardcore securities work that we used to. In fact, we do very little, but it still worked out, checking so many boxes that it wasn't a deterrent for us.
So take me back. I mean, you had already started a firm, so you'd been there before. So you sort of knew what, probably learned a lot of lessons there. But you're coming off, you said, you're breaking up with your partner, your dog died. I mean, everything's going bad. 18 years, that's an old dog, by the way.
He's an old dog. Yeah. Coronavirus was full swing, right? Everybody.
We were all going to die, right?
Right? We're wiping off cereal boxes.
Yeah. Well, there was that time we were all going to die. That's the way, that's That's what everybody thought. So you start a firm in that sort of mental state, even though you'd done it before. I mean, what was going, take us back. What was going through your mind? I mean, was it just like, well, I guess got to do it again? Or is it, I've been here before, I can do it? Or were you nervous? I mean, tell me, what was it like?
Yeah, it was definitely not a good feeling. Yeah, when I was opening up the firm way back when, this one, it was positive, things were going well, etc. This was the opening of a new firm because a hand was forced, right, with the partnership dispute, the breakup of the prior firm. I knew I wasn't going to go back to work for anyone else. I could never do that ever again. And the money and lifestyle was just too good. But so I was like, okay, this is going to move forward. I'm going to continue to service my client. I had hundreds of clients at that point. And so it wasn't a question of if I was going to do it, I was going to do it. But with all of the world was shut down with the virus. We didn't have any money coming into the firm. Every project stopped. We made a decision with our firm at that time that we were going to counsel our clients and not charge them for it. We're like, look, this is the end of the world. As you just said, we kind of were thinking, like, hey, this could go a really terrible way. We didn't want to be greedy. And all of our clients were really suffering, just as we were. But, they were like, what about these jobs are working? What about these contracts? What about our people? Do we have to keep paying them? Do we have to pay to keep the lights on? What do we do? What if, the ones that had real disputes and other issues going on, it just compounded their level of pain. So it was tough. It was emotionally very tough to deal with all of their issues. And then once the phone stopped, which would be almost midnight every night, it was like that for months of that counseling these clients. And a lot of it was just psychological counseling, like, it's going to be okay, right? Like, hey, let's hug each other virtually through the phone. It ended up being okay, right? But it was very, very tough. I was most concerned about how do I keep my people paid, and I'd done well in savings and continued to keep them paid at the level that they had been getting paid for months without any income coming in. The good and the bad is I continued to do that. The bad part is I sucked my reserves and savings dry. But in hindsight, I'd do the same thing. I'd probably make some modifications, but I think I would still keep that going. And more of that was just my own psychology, right? Knowing that I was doing what I would want someone to do for me, which is lessen the amount of stress of what was going on. So it was just kind of survival there for a while. Once we got the name down, it was like, we'll deal with who we and what we are as a firm a little bit later, right? Let's keep things moving as much as we can. And sure enough, the world opened back up. Georgia was a good place, if you will. We didn't buy into really anything. It's a topic for another day, but I think our shutdown here was a lot different than it was in other places of the world. I feel very fortunate that we were here. So.
Yeah, I remember some of those early days. We would have that, I think it was a weekly Zoom call with some of our friends, lawyer friends that own firms. Yeah, that was a weird time. I've just blocked it out of my memory, but that was a weird time.
It was. I mean, as I was thinking about, coming on today, I knew we would probably be talking about that time. And it was just like, we were doing virtual happy hours. And most of our discussion, my recollection of it was telling each other that it's going to be all right. Like I think we spoke some details about employees and overhead and this and that, but I remember the overall theme being, resilience, patience, right, love, and let's help each other, support each other. It was a nice time in that sense. I think, of people coming together. Yeah, I thought it really was.
Like a lot of lawyers sort of had to make these real-time pivots during that time period to sort of do stuff. And I know a lot of stories, and you do too, and you have yours. It reminds me, 2 firms ago for me, I was at that firm, Foltz Martin. I don't know if you remember them.
I do.
And they, Martin had this huge real estate transactional practice, represented, developers and owners and that kind of stuff, huge. And then the Great Recession hit, and like overnight, deals just came to a halt. And then he pivoted, and his practice sort of became, representing the same kind of folks, but against the banks and against the lenders. And his book of business like doubled. I mean, it's like, it was amazing to watch. And so I remember having to do a lot of that work. I hated it. It was like, you're fighting with both your hands tied behind your back and maybe missing a leg too. And you're just like taking the blows from the bank attorneys. I think that firm you went to was on the other side of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of that. Firm was doing a whole lot of that stuff.
Yeah, you represented the banks. You were blooding me up. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So COVID was tough. You had to start the new firm. So what's it like now, man? Tell us where you are. And, I think you've had more growth. I know people have come and probably some have gone, but where are you now?
Yeah, it's been great. Right after all that mess, wasn't too many months after partnership divorce was finalized that I picked up 2 of my largest clients to date. I mean, just massive clients throwing on lots of work and lots of cash. And so that was something that was a nice rebound, if you will, from all the emotional mess was that. So it was really nice. Also, having a chance to hit the reset button, although like I said, a moment ago, wasn't something that I wanted to do, but when it happened, it was like, all right, no, it might as well embrace it. And I didn't have to clear anything through anyone else. And there were a lot of things that I had wanted to do, just didn't jive with kind of how we were set up before and the firm philosophy, et cetera. But I had a chance now, an almost blank slate, if you will, to rebuild the firm from the ground up. And that's exactly what I did. I did things that I did not do the first time because I just didn't know any better. I was so pompous and young and all that other stuff. I was very focused on just making money. And what I learned is there's so much more than making money if you want to have a successful business. So I feel like I did it the right way this time. A lot of that was implementation of the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. For those that have read the book Traction, it was one of the biggest catalysts in changing the way that we were building the firm. And now it's solid on multiple levels in a way that we never were before. Not that it was a bad firm before. It's just so much better, in my opinion, now, based on us doing the hundreds of hours of work that we put, onto working on the firm versus in it, so to speak.
I know a lot of firms who are on the U.S. system and they just swear by it and they say it's just night and day after they've done it for 2-3 years. It's like, it's good. I'm not there yet. I'm headed there at some point. So you mentioned a second ago, you said you got 2 of your biggest clients. And again, I've always considered you a rainmaker in the greatest sense of the word. You're good at getting business, man. So what's your approach? I mean, how do you go get your 2 biggest clients? Teach me.
Yeah. So both of those came about from people that I knew. They trusted me. I trusted them. We had existing relationships, enough so to where they were willing to send billion-dollar clients my way. And that's the revenue that these companies are throwing off. But in private companies too, both of them were family held by just 2 people. I mean, just amazing amount of success. But I laid the groundwork with years of courting relationships of certain advisors, CPAs, financial planners, operational consultants, other attorneys, but it's relationship based, right? I mean, most of us know that, but that's truly the key, I feel like, for long lasting business development. There's always the occasional right place, right time, or, you just get that call for that nice little project and it comes out of the blue, but that's not the majority of the business that I receive. The business I get from, putting in the groundwork on relationships.
And your client, your business clients, more sophisticated, probably a longer sales cycle. It's not like consumer practice, divorce or personal injury or criminal.
Yeah. CEOs are not combing the internet for their next law firm, right? They're going to their buddies who are also CEOs, going to their CPAs or wealth manager and going, who do you trust, right? Where would you send your business? And thankfully, it's, again, laying the right groundwork. You have to do phenomenal work. You have to do really good work, be engaged, et cetera. It's not just that relationship, right? You have to deliver. But we're really good. So it all worked out. But yeah, I love business development. It is truly it's such a challenge. It is truly I'm an introvert by nature, but I continue to love the challenge because if I succeed, I get some immediate results, right? Smiles and money and compliments, two, three things I really love. So it is very self-serving, So
Yeah, yeah. So another thing you're involved in is EO, which is not EOS. It's what is it? Entrepreneurs Organization. Is that what it's called?
it is. Yep, yep.
So there's probably some folks that know what that is, and probably some that don't. But why don't you sort of explain what it is and how long you've been involved with it, and then I may dive in a little bit. I don't know if you're sworn to secrecy or not, but once you're initiated, you can't talk
show
about
you the
it.
handshake, but there are
Exactly.
certain things I can say. So yeah. EO is a worldwide organization that's comprised of business owners, and it's business owners that have met a certain financial level and criteria in their business. Most of the folks are invited in or will know somebody there, and then you go through some classes and training before you actually get in. So that's kind of the cool thing about EO is by the time you're in, you've already put in some time. Other folks have put time into you, and it is an extremely tight knit group of business owners. If you're in a moderate to large size city, chances are you're going to have an EO chapter in your city. So I'd say, it has been by far in my career in the top 5 best things that I've ever done, both personal development, professional development. I could talk for the next several hours about it. And truly, the advantage of it is, and I would say, if it's not EO, you can replicate this. Surround yourself with superstars. These people are phenomenal. I mean, every time I get together with them, I am in awe of what they accomplish and how they go about it. And some of these businesses are smaller than mine, some are much larger. But the interesting thing is you have folks that, because of the training, et cetera, you come in, high level of confidentiality, which allows these business owners to really express themselves. There's a lot of humility that goes on and a lot of sharing of things that challenging in our lives. And sometimes it's personal, you'll be in a group and somebody will say, hey, I found out that my significant other is cheating on me. I mean, that was an actual scenario, right? It's like, I don't know that I'm the best trained person to help with that, but they were willing to share. It's the kind of place where you can share something like that. And then people share ways to overcome, those challenges. But it's a great place also to tap into community, leadership, personal growth. I've had opportunity to hear and meet some of the most amazing CEOs, business owners, people that have won Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, you name it, it's an amazing organization. Because it's worldwide, you're immediately part of a great fraternity, so to speak. So not a lot of lawyers in it. You tend to, it's just something that lawyers don't do. But I would encourage folks to look into that or find something else in your community. But I think having a peer-to-peer group is invaluable. I've had one in some form or another for 15 years, and I would never own a business without having some type of peer-to-peer, whether formal or informal. I think it's absolutely needed.
A lot of lawyers, they talk about these mastermind groups. I'm in some, where you're with other lawyers. This is sort of like that, I think, but you're with a lot of non-lawyers, and it's a little bit bigger, I think, you tell me, but bigger than a traditional lawyer mastermind group where you're really just talking about your business. Maybe you talk about a couple personal things, but, other people that I know that are involved in EO, they talk about, I think you guys have some sort of saying about, the personal above I can't even remember what it is, like.
Oh, we call it 5%.
5%, that's what it is. Yeah, the 5%.
It's that 5% that most people would never speak of, right? It's that 5% in our and with our families, work, and personal lives that, for good or for bad, we don't share with other folks. It's the real deep stuff, if you will. So, yeah.
And so, you make really good friends, and my understanding is most of the little groups, the cohorts, stay together for years and years and years, right? I mean, once they sort of form one of these groups, don't you guys, you're traveling together, you're doing all sorts of things, right?
I traveled across the world with my first, we call them forums, small group. Gosh, went to Ecuador, Galapagos Islands, Cape Town, South Africa, Costa Rica. Now, there's some small groups that don't travel like that, but we did, and it's phenomenal. And even though I'm in a different group now, which we all decided to, disband, change it up, but it's just amazing. And and you and I are in a lawyers business owner group, and it's got its advantages. But one thing about attorneys is we tend to crawl into our little hole, put our heads down, and then the rest is history, right? We pick our heads up 30 years later and go, where's the fax machine? So the great thing about being with other CEOs really is they are so much more in tune with things that our legal industry is not. Technology is a big one. I learned so much from them about things they're using that are easily applicable to our industry. It's just that attorneys aren't using it necessarily, and resources and honestly ways of looking at things. We tend to find that, you practice law long enough, folks think a lot alike, and it's because of the nature of practice. So it's really nice having outsiders ask me very critical questions like, why do you do that way? Well, I don't know. I was taught that way, right? And things that you wouldn't always necessarily, think of. How we compensate our folks, right? Why do you do that? Why do you have business development? We don't do this, but, we see folks that are good business developers where their firms require them to crank out hours. It's like, is that really their highest and best use? So having outside CEOs, business owners push me, challenge me, question my thinking, my philosophies, and I love that.
They probably say, why do you call it business development? We call it sales.
You're right. Yeah, that's so true. So true. It's so funny. Yeah, to hear them ask questions, you really find out how quirky law is and how old school it is. It is so old school. But things are changing.
Yeah,
we're fine.
Yeah. So. Well, I remember seeing, our friend Jimmy Trimble. He did a post, something about EO, and I'm looking at the people in the picture. I'm like, I recognize that head. That's Mitesh.
Some starburst pattern.
I didn't know you two knew each other. Yes, that was cool.
That is cool too. Again, I think I've gotten a chance to rub shoulders with some really cool folks here in the metro Atlanta area and through EO. Arthur Blank, founder and chairman at Home Depot. I don't think he's any longer the chairman, but Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, her husband Jesse Itzler. Just really interesting. Vern Harnish, he wrote the book Scaling Up. He's actually an EO founder. He's very well known. It's amazing, just the types of folks that we can meet.
That's cool, man. So let's go back to the law firm. So, you start the new thing. You're a good business developer. You do some works. But tell me about sort of your typical week. What's it like now? How much is out there getting the business and managing relationships versus actually really cranking out the work?
Yeah, so cranking out work for me is a little different than maybe most folks because I don't really bill hours. I am engaged with clients, I'm attending meetings, things like that, and I will bill for that time. But to give you an idea, it's probably 20 hours a month that I bill. The reason is it's not my highest and best use. I truly am a believer that we can all be good at multiple things, but I think that we can really only be great at one or two things. And if you are trying to bring in the client, do the work, get it out the door, follow up, the administrative side, chances are you're not really good at multiple areas there, right? And I think that's one of the issues that our industry faces. I see it with others, but it's especially prevalent with us because we're smart folks, right? We're tenacious. We're taught like, you can figure this out. We do not need to figure it out. So anyway, sorry, just a little side note, but yeah, so my average day, overall time, I would say that I spend 50% of it is on business development, and that includes some client facing, again, strategy meetings, helping with structuring this and that. Not much pen to paper drafting though. I've got folks here that are just so much better than I am at that. And then the other 50% of the time is spent working on the firm. So processes, procedures, growth, fostering our folks, mentoring our people, helping them find the resources that they need, helping them with business development. So it's very much now focused on let's grow the firm, bring in new clients, service the ones that we have, but yeah, probably 50-50. I would say client plus client side stuff, and then the other half is working on the film.
It's interesting. You mentioned something earlier, and you sort of touched on it there too. Your highest and best use. It's really strange. Strange, maybe the wrong word. Misguided, maybe is a better word. That a lot of law firms, especially for their partners, they expect them to do everything. They expect them to crank out lots of work, go develop clients, train people. I mean, it's like they want them to do it all. And I think it's a unicorn of a person that would be good at all those things to begin with. But even if they were good at all of them, it's not, I don't think, a good use of their mental bandwidth to try to do it all. I think law firms would be better served. Find the people that are good at cranking out the work. Find the people that are good at training the people. Find the people that are good about managing relationships, and find the people that can go hunt the whales, right? Yeah. And you shouldn't expect everybody to do everything. And that's just crazy to me that that's still, many, many, many firms, that's the way it is. And it's the way they structure their compensation, all of it. It's just crazy to me.
It's crazy to me too. I do not understand it. It might be one of the very few, if not the only industry now that's like that, like medical, dental, accounting, valuation, all these other business service firms. They figured it out. They're like, it is not good to have these highly compensated, brain surgeons doing everything. There's certain things that, frankly, we have no business to do. There are other things where we should. And yeah, I don't get it. I mean, if you've got somebody in your firm that can really bring in clients and produce, get them from out, get them away from the desk, get them outside, get them to go bring in more business so that you can have two people behind desks instead of one, and it's amazing. It'll pay for it if you get more business, but I don't get it. That's, so old school. But
so what was the transition for you from doing the work to taking this role? I think it's probably pretty easy for you mentally. I know there are some attorneys that they're so caught up in their self-image of being an attorney, a great attorney, that it's hard for them to let that go. I know that's a common thing, but how was it for you to move from doing the service work to sort of the role you have now?
It's kind of multifaceted. I think first is some self-actualization that you can still be a phenomenal attorney, and I'm a really good attorney, and it's just, I've had great training. I've had good partners that I've worked for. I've made good mistakes, so, but I feel like I'm a really good attorney, and part of being a really good attorney is not just the work. The work is only a tiny fraction of being a really good attorney. And so, it was probably, for me, once I left to start my own practice, the big shift was when I got the guts enough to hire a full-time W-2'd employee. Somebody was making real money. I'm talking like, well over and into the $100,000 mark. In a couple of years, that person was at and over $200K. And, telling myself like, okay, it's going to be okay, right? You can hire this person. They're going to do this work. It'll give you more bandwidth to go get business. It absolutely did. It took me about 45 days before I started kicking myself going, God, why did I not do this 5 years earlier? It literally, I thought about it for about 4.5 to 5 years before I pulled that trigger to hire that first W-2, attorney. Now we have several, and it was a game changer. I think there have been several big game changing moments, but one was hiring an office manager, somebody to do everything that's non-billable. Thankfully, I did that early, and I think that's a big part of why I had success right out of the gate. And actually, I'm convinced of it. And then the second was leverage. I mean, if you don't leverage your firm, it's pretty easy to do the math on what your life is going to look like and how much income you make for the rest of your life. It's limited by your billable rate and how many hours you're willing to work. And hopefully you collect on all that. But that's it. I mean, you can do the easy math and go, here's how many days off I may get. Here's how much I can make. But if you don't leverage it, that is your equation for the rest of your life. And I didn't want that. I love having, take about the equivalent of, I probably should say, lots of time off, lots of flexibility. I love it. I wouldn't have it.
So another thing that we haven't touched on is, you're continuing to try to grow your firm, and that, part of that is bringing in clients. The other part is getting attorneys. So how much of your time is spent recruiting? And, tell me about you don't have to give me your secrets, but, generally, what's your approach to recruiting? How do you find people? How do you sell the firm? How do you tell them, hey, this is a good place to come?
I'd say 15% of my time, if we looked at the year as a whole, right? Ebbs and flows, but it's about 15%, 10 to 15% that I spend on talking with and trying to identify other attorneys that may join this firm. What I've found over time is the ones that have business, which are unicorns in our industry, right? It's why you got a handful of partners and a whole bunch of associates, but they're the hardest to bring in. And so to do that, you have to have a relationship with them. Occasionally you'll get lucky and find somebody who's ready to move right then, etc. But what I want is I want them to think of me when in our firm when they're thinking about a move. And that again it's business development kind of, it's just in a different way, right? It's with attorneys and letting them know who you are, and you got to stay in touch with folks. That's the one things I've had a few of those I've been working on, and then they end up going somewhere else, right? And it's like, gosh, why did that happen? So it does take time. The other way that we attract folks is we really put a lot of time into our HR hiring processes, and we absolutely have. I'm convinced of the most phenomenal attorneys for us. I mean, they match our philosophy. They work the way that we want them to. They're great. They came from amazing big firms, great schools. They've got amazing personalities, but it took a lot of work on the front end to really push us to find out what do we want, and what's good for us. What does our current team look like? Does everybody on the team currently buy into this philosophy? And there was a period in the not too far past where even with the new firm, I had to make some adjustments based on firm philosophy. So, but I think if you invest the time on looking for and finding good attorneys, especially if they're going to be service-based attorneys, they're out there. You can find amazing folks. Partners, the business developers, much harder, but it can be done. Just put in the time. One big game changer for us is we went to a recruiter that we pay by the hour, and what we found is that their process, because they've been working with other industries, not law, but they really had a system and process down for how do we write the job description in a way that's going to attract exactly the kind of folks that you want. I was very skeptical. I was like, well, just some words, it's going to make a difference. And I was like, it's just going to be some job description like the hundreds of others that I've read. Not the case. And the words matter, the process matters, the system matters, and it frankly just produces better results at the end. So we've got a 5-step hiring process for attorneys, and everyone in the firm is engaged when we do it. The folks coming into our firm are going to get a chance one-on-one to meet, talk with people, ask the hard questions, and our team as well. They're going to get a chance to weigh in. But we're so dialed in right now that we don't need any turds coming in and smelling up this place. I mean, everybody gets, at least all the attorneys get a say and a voice in, you think you can work with this person. If the going gets tough and you got something really tough, you want this person by your side. So, but I think if you invest the time in it, pays good dividends.
I'm going to have to get the name of your recruiter when we get off here. You'll have to,
Will do.
if you'll share that secret with me. I call it the ABR philosophy. Always be recruiting, because the timing is always, it's never right when you need it or right when they're ready. And so you just got to keep it going, and then hopefully the stars will align at the same time, and then boom. And you got to have lots of irons in the fire, all that stuff. So I hear you. And you're a recruiter. I mean, you used to be a recruiter, so you better be good at it, right?
That's it. That is true. That's true. Yep. The one thing that I think that just a quick piece of advice for most folks, and I try to remind myself of this, is don't be afraid to ask. When I meet somebody I like and I feel like I get to know them, I'll just tell them, like, Jonathan, I like you, dude. I would love to work with you. And if if you're ever at a transition point, I hope you'll just, call me so we can just talk. And I will say that. I'll tell folks, I'm like, please do me a courtesy. Don't go anywhere unless we've spoken. And most do reach out. So they'll be like, hey, I remember you saying, even if they don't come here, but don't be shy. I mean, we're business owners, most of us are not, but I think you have to be a little bit more bold when it comes to recruiting and attracting. People want to be desired, right? They want to be liked. And think back in, dating days, if you're lucky enough to have somebody courting you, it's like, man, that feels good. So I try to tell folks, I'm like, man, you're awesome. I'd love to work with you. I think it helps.
Well, Mitesh, there's so much more that I'd like to ask you, but you've been very kind with your time today, and I don't want to keep too much longer. So I got one last question, and it's really, as you look back at your career and your multiple, you started a couple firms, you've done lots of different stuff. What advice would you give to folks out there who are further behind you in the journey to maybe speed up their timeline?
Wow. Well, there's so many little pieces of advice. I think for attorneys, especially, not getting too mired in. Well, let me say this differently. We have the opportunity, a lot of us, of making good money. And then what I find, and I see this in others, is that we get a little trapped and don't follow what we want and our own philosophies. And it's easy for me to, folks out there like, it's easy for him to say he's sitting there, he owns a firm, he can do whatever he wants, but I had to make that scenario, right? And my scenario is not everybody's scenario, but really take the time for yourself to think about what you want. What do you want? What do you want for your family? And things don't come about by sheer chance. Time is ticking by. If you want it, go freaking get it. And yeah, it's going to be perhaps a little painful, but you'll get what you want, truly. And I think especially attorneys, we are smart, we're driven. Most of us, we can solve problems. So solve your own problem. If you don't like where you're at, fix it. Approach it like a client problem. What would you tell your client who says, I hate my job, and I don't like what I do, and I'm working with all these assholes? Like, fix it, and especially where we are. This is America, right? It is harder in other places, but here, no excuses. So want something, go get it.
Great advice. I think we'll end it on that. But before I let you go, for everybody out there, if they want to find you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Absolutely. So our website is blueskylaw.com. My personal email is mpatel@blueskylaw.com. You're welcome to shoot me an email. It's the easiest way because I've got some folks that help monitor that so I don't miss too many things. But yeah, if somebody's out there, you've got a question, you want to, pick my brain. I love talking with other attorneys and other law firm owners, business owners. And I'm probably going to learn a lot of stuff from you too. So yeah, don't hesitate. Please reach out.
Thanks again, Mitesh, man. This has been fun.
This has been fun. I appreciate you having me. I've loved watching your success and appreciate all the actual technical work. So.
All right. Well, yeah, I enjoy working with you, man. Thanks.
Likewise. All right, man. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.